Okay, welcome to the Regen Room. Today we are speaking with Helen and Hugo Disler, who are the co-founders of Farming Secrets. So you guys have been working with farmers for decades now and been on this regenerative journey for years. You know, we're only just starting to see this emergence of regenerative agriculture and regenerative thinking now, but you guys have been at it for so long. So can you guys tell us about how that started for you?
Sure. Yeah, you go.
Well, I'll go to the key point. My grandparents are farmers, my parents are farmers, and I farmed for 10 years with a partner, and we started a farm supply store. And it was in the farm supply store in the very early 1980s. I had a chap come to my place at Sassafras, and he gave me the story of a bloke called Colin Hill who started a company called Australian Mineral Fertilizers. And what he said was that when he had a group meetings, he'd have like 200 people turn up, a lot of people turning up because he had natural phosphate, natural potassium, things like that. But the interesting thing was that his car would get vandalised on a couple of occasions. And I sort of think, well, that's strange. And it was a few years later, we started selling natural fertilizers, fish fertilizers, seaweed fertilizers, that. And approached our buying group, Combined Rural Traders, that they should be interested in it. And I quickly learned there's us and them. There's the chemical jocks and there's the natural people.
Wow.
And it took a lot. I had many incidences right through from when we started the farm supply store in 1968, that many incidents that showed that which didn't sort of make the change. And because we started stocking this Australian mineral fertiliser, farmers would sort of say, well, my strawberries did really well, et cetera, that we really got involved with natural products. Mm-hmm. But prior to that, what was another thing that really stuck in my mind, we had a farm, as I said, the farm supply store, we had two farmers come in, and the farmer who told me about the mineral fertilisers of Colin Hill, that was Jeff Bogle. David Bogle that was his father, came into the store, and at around about the age of 50, he had heart problems, and so he retired from his orchard. And I was talking to a customer who came in, and there's another farmer who retired early too, and they both died within a few years, or maybe 10 years of each other. And this customer came in and said, oh yeah, they were the days when the farmers were using a product called gasothine. He said the gasothine was so powerful that when you sprayed it on an apple, the grub would crawl out of it. And these guys didn't read the labels properly, didn't take it seriously, and didn't use gas masks. Yep. So it's little incidents like that steered us into, as I just said previously, it's like us and them, and there shouldn't be us and them.
Mm. Yeah, so that's what really sparked your passion for this natural regenerative way of farming. Hey, you've seen, okay, we've got the chemical farmers here, and they're getting sick and they're dying. And how can we maybe do things differently, which are a bit more natural and organic and healthy?
Exactly. And my wake-up call, I was a teacher, but Hugo wanted me to work with him, and we used to do stock takes, and all these, like you saw, the traditional toxic, really strong chemicals, and one had a skull and crossbones on it, poison written on it. And I said, Hugo, what do farmers use this for? And he said, oh, the orchardists use it. And I said, but they're putting it on stuff we're going to eat. And I had no idea that people would do such things. So, yeah, we started really looking for stuff, but it was really hard to find alternatives, and we were still selling products. We wouldn't, now we would be encouraging farmers to make their own compost, vermicast teas, all that sort of stuff. So it's coming from the farm. Those days it was very much, we were in that mindset. But once we swapped out of that and found natural fertiliser, we bought a company manufacturing and selling seaweed and fish fertiliser.
Yep.
And that included animal minerals as well. And we met Pat Colby, who was one of the early people here in Australia who was very much into natural farming. So we had the pleasure of meeting her and learning a lot from her, to the point we put a naturopath in our store, which was back in the 80s was pretty unusual thing to do.
Yeah.
So we wanted to help the farmers. So we started going to field days with these products, and over 10 years of talking and everything, they still thought we were selling magic bullets. And we were meeting plenty of farmers who'd made the change. So I said, Hugo, we've got to stop doing this. We've got to actually go and film the farmers that are being successful.
Yeah.
And so Farming Secrets started. And it was called Farming Secrets because they were secrets. Not many people knew any alternative but buying the common NPKs and things.
Well, it's interesting to note that a lot of the farms these days are still using chemicals. Maybe not the same back then, but those poisonous chemicals are still getting used widely. Coles and Woolies, most of the food in there that's stocked in there is sprayed with all that stuff. It's just crazy that this stuff's still happening. How many years later? It's unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah, and it is really. I just found an old film I'd taken of Hugh Lovell, who died recently, and he said, Helen and Hugo are selling knowledge, they're not selling products, they just want you to know. And he said that's where it all starts, because selling product is never going to get them off the bandwagon of buying and applying and being basically tricked into thinking they need these products. So it is knowledge, it's education. So that's why we are so passionate about getting the information out to people. So
100%. Yeah, I applaud you guys for doing that. It's awesome. And before we go into the education, I just want to touch on that little bit about information versus product. And, because growing up, I was always taught, you got to eat your veggies, you got to eat your fruit. And that was about as much of the information as I received because it would make me healthy. But now I'm, living on this farm and learning about agriculture and chemicals. And if I go to Woolies now, and if I go to buy the fruit and veg from Woolies, I believe, I may have once believed that was a good thing, that would keep me healthy, but now I see it from a whole different lens where I'm like, this stuff is sprayed with poison chemicals. So even though it might seem like a healthy lifestyle to eat fruit and veg, it's just as bad as eating, preservatives that are in packeted consumables, because you're still getting the poisonous chemicals. So you really do have to go straight to the source of how do we take the food from that's healthy and organic from the soil and then eat that, and then we get the real nutrients. So it's just a massive insight for me personally, and I'm sure so many people out there are probably even unaware now. And it's really, that's what I was saying, it's great that you guys do the work that you do, because really that educational piece is so important. So you run a company now called Farming Secrets, where you're teaching farmers how to transition away from chemical farming to more organic methods. So how did you guys get into that line of work?
Well, as I said, Australian mineral fertilizers were the first things we bought. And also there's a company at Yates who had a product called Dynamic Lifter. And so we got interested in that and stocked that. So it was a gradual process that got into it. And the farm supply store got a bit heavy-handed. We had a staff of 24 people. And it was, at the age of 50, I thought I wanted to retire at 50. So we hived off the section of that business, which was natural fertilizers, natural stock supplements. And we took that with us, which we called, we called Vitec, which is still flourishing now, which is good to know that a company is still doing exceptionally well. And then what we heard, that company was starting to get too big. We got up to 5 staff. We thought, this is mushrooming. Growth rate was like 50, 100% per annum, and from a very low start. And so what we learnt was from the farms we talked to by selling product, that we making massive change for them. And they're really appreciating that. Sort of say, well, if it's doing this for my sheep or it's doing this for my crops, what can I take? And we thought, well, no, that's out of our field about the human side of it. And people were eating some of our animal products, but good on, especially seaweed. And we started learning from farmers, selling natural products, and we started Vitec. And then, sorry, I missed the point.
You're right. How did you get into the educational side of that?
The Vitec was getting too big. We can see it was going to be another big business. So we got out of it with a good profit, and we sold to people who made it profitable as well. And we saw that the farmers were really thirsty for education. They really wanted thirsty for change. And that's why we got into farming secrets, because we thought, well, rather than retire and put our feet up, we will provide information. And what we initially did was filmed farmers who are starting the journey of using natural products. And we're going to film them. The idea was to film them as they progressed, but we found that was too slow. So we had to go to experts, mentors, and farmers who'd already changed, and show those farmers as a showpiece to other farmers, so other farmers could straight away copy them.
Yeah. And how did you find that? Did you manage to, at that point, find farmers who had successfully transitioned?
Yeah,
there's a lot of them.
A lot of them, and a lot of them now are well known in the industry, because we went to people like Colin Seiss, who was the first to introduce pasture cropping. The Haggertys of Western Australia, who have a huge farm but dedicated to nutrition in their product. So we followed their story from reducing things. Ron and Bev Smith, who are dairy farmers. And interesting, a lot of the people who changed because of a disaster. Colin got burnt out. Ron got very sick from chemicals and was ridiculed as a dairy farmer. So he went back to using the NPK. He got sick again. So he was forced into looking for alternatives. And we found a lot of farmers had gone to the natural way because they actually had been sick or had some disaster. It's the same as Charles Massey's book, Call of the Red Warbler. He found a lot of the farmers were, something happened, forcing them to relook, like could have been drought, floods, anything like that.
I'd like to make a point there, Josh, that the Haggertys didn't start from a disaster. They actually start from intuition, just like maybe like the Aborigines have. It was just a natural intuition that things could be better, and and so they developed that, and they're still developing that on, well, try and see, but intuition and reducing chemicals or cutting them out.
Both really interesting concepts to spark change, intuitive feeling, and then, disaster. And I think that, it's funny, this year we've kind of seen both of them as well. We've seen the disaster of COVID hit and everyone's reassessing what to do and how to live. And then I also have noticed an emergence of this intuitive feeling that people are having of like, okay, maybe we should try something different. It's amazing that those things are coming through.
And people also, a lot of the women are very in touch with nurturing. And they were often the ones when we had Vitek who'd ring and say, my husband will not stop using chemicals, can you help me? So we did start looking for ways that we could support people to make changes just by doing trials and things. But and Sam, we were talking about Jerry Brunetti before, animal nutritionist, but a generalist. We were just so lucky. It was very early days of filming these gems that were being presented to people, but with the days there's no internet. We had to burn DVDs and mail them out and everything. I was a lot of work. And only with Ray coming along was everything being digitalised.
Yeah, it's a different world now. But you guys must have learnt so much during all those times and recording all of those programs and courses and education content. I'd like to ask a question to both of you individually, maybe one first and the next. But what's been one of the things that has stood out the most for you as an inspiration through your learning? Through your learning with farmers,
Well, as Peter Andrews says, I thought it was a club, like the politicians and all these sort of people hanging on to the system, the universities and CSIRO. He says, Hugo, it's not the club, it's the gang. And people laugh. But so what you've got is the gang running agriculture, and and I think, and there's a lot of people a lot of farmers who are intuitive, and you follow the intuitive things. And what you get from the gang is that, including institutes, you get absolute things have been totally disproved. Originally, the CSIRO used to say it was 1,000 years to create an inch of topsoil. And, you know, this is the days of imperialism and imperial measurements. And then it's more recently changed, takes 100 years to create an inch of topsoil. Colin Sykes has created 600 mils, 2 foot of topsoil in something like 8 or 10 years. Wow. A dairy farmer has created within about 5 years 5 or 6 or 7 inches of topsoil. So this is something what you've got to get away from the gang and start looking at the intuitive farmers who've made a difference and how they've looked after the soil with reduced costs, and not only reduced costs, with a lot of well-being, and their kids want to stay on the farm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've actually seen something similar here on Shambhala Farm. You know, this place used to do chemical farming. There's been a farm here for about 20 years. It's only been about 8 years since Craig's come on and started to transition towards, you know, more organic methods. And yeah, I've been here for 8 months nearly now. And even in that period, I've seen change because, you know, more recently, 6 months ago, we had a guy called Sebastian come on, and he's a young guy from Chile, and he's you know, really interested in regenerative farming. So he's using a system over there, like a no-dig system that they talk about in the Market Gardener. And already in the last few months, we've seen an increase in topsoil. It's amazing to just like witness that and go, wow, like, you know, we just need to get our hands in the dirt and yeah, start treating the soil with care. But I'll let you answer that question as well now, Helen.
Yeah, I think what I have learned is that farmers have been farming traditionally as a family. It's very, very hard for them to change the mindset. And what's happening now is there's a lot of young people coming in who are new to farming and are very willing to listen and observe. And so I guess the big thing for me is seeing the farmers who are intuitively tuning in to what they're doing and have got a commitment to the planet and looking after the planet and learning from all cultures and applying it and being willing to try and fail, and how resilient really our world is. And people, I just get so inspired by people with I like new ideas and things as well. I just love it. I'm seeing, I have brought a book here. One of my early inspirations is reading this book, From Soil to Psyche. And it is about, this guy wrote it in the 70s, and he's talking about secrets of food combining, nutritional needs, know your habits, organic revolution, fasting, all this sort of stuff that's become very popular now. Yeah. That's 40, 50 years ago. And that book actually put me on a track of finding these things happening, because I just knew in my head that I actually don't like chemicals. I just like things being natural and seeing nature take its place. So for me, seeing all that unfolding has been a big excitement for me. And we have learnt a lot, learnt a hell of a lot of how complex the soil is and how you're never, ever going to know. It's a journey, a really exciting journey. So if people are on a journey and discovering, they're on the right path as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you're right. People are inspiring and extremely resilient. And it's amazing how interconnected all of our living systems are. And, you know, us being a part of it, you know, when you really start to explore that, I'm reading a book by Daniel Whale at the moment called Designing Regenerative Cultures. He talks a lot about interbeing and interconnectedness. And he talks about living the questions, so not necessarily looking for the answers, but like just being curious and asking questions, like exploring this interconnectedness and what it means to be a human on Earth, what it means to be part of nature. Interesting things to explore, definitely, because you know, like you said, it is a journey that just continually will unfold, and it really becomes a colourful journey. You know, for someone that might be watching this and going, oh, you know, I'm working in the city, or I'm living a life with, you know, where I'm going to this corporate job, or it sometimes can seem a bit dull and a bit grey, but when you start to, you know, get back out into nature and explore into being with nature, the colour starts to come back to life, and it's really beautiful experience.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, things like, I am concerned about, we've got grandchildren now, I'm very concerned about the environment that they do live in, and that we do get more access to understanding. We're born to be part of nature, you know, to be outside, to be growing things. And Dr. Arden Anderson, when we filmed him, he said you need at least 27 different plants a day in your diet. And Hugo and I went, what? You know, we probably have about 15, but 27. So I started counting herbs and things I put in our salad.
Start counting the spices.
Yeah, almost. You know, but you get to see if animals need 60 or so nutrients just to sustain them, so you're not having to have any illness or stillbirth, all that sort of stuff. Of course we do. Of course we need that huge range. And who was the dentist who started the dairy stuff? He said by the late 1980s, 90s, we'll start seeing infertility amongst human beings because of the toxic environment we live in and the monoculture food we eat, you know, which is five different crops basically.
That's what Zach Bush talks about as well, right? He talks about the infertility rate in men, and it's just on this sharp, like, downward, like, you know, they talk about the COVID curve, and it's like, how about this infertility curve where it's just like, we don't realize it, but men are just becoming infertile, and it's like, you know, talk about it at the end of the world. If we don't, it's not going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And people go and look for IVF and things, and I'm not knocking any of this. You need to take that veil back, as you say, and ask questions. Why is this happening? What can I do? Instead, the medical system is ripping people off by thousands and thousands of dollars with pretty questionable results, really, given the outcome of these treatments. So anyway, it's a whole other track, isn't it, of
definitely
what we've seen over our time.
Yeah, well, back to the interconnectedness of it all, you can definitely, if you explore these conversations, you could just be talking for hours. But on that, you know, always asking the questions, I've got one more question for you guys, and that is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to people on Earth at the moment that are looking to get more involved with soil health?
As my mentor, when I was selling natural fertilizers, he said, the microbes in the soil are pretty well mirrored to the microbes in an animal's and a human gut. And I thought, oh, that sounds a bit strange. And I thought, no, who wants, you know, that's all that in your gut. And what the thing is this, that if people worked on getting the microbes going in their soil, and the best way to do that is by compost, and to make the compost very, very complex, like putting things in. And I'll just go off on a side shoot. The establishment will say there's a balance sheet system. So if you're exporting a ton of wheat off the per hectare, or, you know, 6 tons per hectare or whatever, there's so much phosphate gets taken away, so much nitrogen gets taken away. So you've got to put that back. Well, it's a furphy, because nitrogen should come from the atmosphere. It shouldn't come from, you know, making from a chemical source. And what also these people who, when they do composting, you don't have to use that balance sheet system. And some people say that, some experts say that the soil will keep producing, providing you keep the microbes going in the soil could keep producing for 1 million years. And then some say, well, it'll keep producing for at least 1,000 years. Well, it's downside better than using the balance sheet system of replenishing it every year. And the more you can make your compost, this gets back to the key point. The more you can make your compost for your home garden or for the farm, as complex as you can, put as many different products in it, and safely put the products in. That's quite an explanation in that too, that you'll find a minuscule amount of nutrients are required to have a very healthy crop, a very healthy animals, etc. So it's getting the microbes going versus the so-called balance sheet system, where you have to replace what you put in. And once people understand that and make vermicompost tea, and the vermicompost tea comes from extremely complex compost, Yeah, which might have rock dusts and things like that in it, but not in excess. That is the key, to have all these catalysts to do the job rather than the balance sheet system of replacing things which have been exported.
Mm.
In certain areas like vegetables, you may need a bit of the balance sheet system going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting for sure. If we start to look at our waste, not as waste, but as living matter, which can be put back into the system.
Mm.
And Helen,
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. And Helen, one piece of advice, for people looking to get involved in gardening and farming and in soil health.
Josh, we started looking at what people did need to must do. We formed a list of 10 must do's, probably 7 years ago or something, which boiled down to 3 must do's for any gardener or anything else. And that is, because we believe plants drive the system with the photosynthesis and bringing food into the soil with that interaction, aim for 100% ground cover. Weeds, leave a whole lot there. Minimal disturbance so that the activity of mycorrhiza under soil and things which carry the food back are left in place, and as much biodiversity as you can have in that soil. If you focus on that, you will find your soil will flourish. And I think people think they have to, definitely weeds, people go crazy about weeds. They're very valuable, and that each weed is telling you about your soil. So it's that thing again of asking questions and learning about these things. And the soil is underneath it all, which is what is driving your plant growth, etc., etc. And we've just recently done a 21-day soil challenge with our farmers and gardeners, and they have realised that they actually have not really looked at just physically observing your soil, smelling it. Does it smell good?
Yeah.
Taste the grass. Does it taste good? They're very basic, simple things that people overlook. And so I say keep it simple,
Yeah, we've actually just changed the name out here. So we don't call it weeding anymore. We call it soil cultivation because, no one wants, we spend hours in the fields weeding, and we're just trying to change that framing around okay, we're actually in soil cultivation. And then, it's not like the weeds are a bad thing that we need to remove. We just need to, manage them and learn to live with them. And and then to your other point about biodiversity, so important that we, diversify it. And, we see that in our ecosystems, but it's really important that we see that in ourselves as well now, in our communities, and how can we diversify to strengthen and create resilient communities. So that's such an interesting concept, biodiversity. But thank you for your time today, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. I'm really privileged to be able to sit here and have a conversation with you guys. So thank you.
Josh, thank you so much. It's a privilege to have been invited, and so thank you, and thank you for what you're doing. You've woken me up to other areas through Ray, but I won't go on because it's I probably don't want me to keep talking. But you have woken me up a lot more to the Aboriginal culture. I've been fascinated with knowing more, but you're actually bringing a lot forth. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, well, that's no worries, because I'm not really doing much apart from starting the conversation.
yeah, which is all that's needed. So it's great. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Josh, for allowing us to express ourselves, and thank you for the work you're doing too.
Thanks a lot, Hugo. All right, thanks a lot, Helen and Hugo. Cheers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.